In what sense?
Maybe looking at every other person that, he or she must have a say in this. But again, if you look at what has happened in the United States, taking an example, some would say we're being stampeded into believing that we're not on the right course, knowing full well that we must also have to take our time as a nation, knowing full well that before the November election then, President Obama, actually didn't think the way some Americans would have thought towards a same-sex union.
Look, the definition of a marriage in Nigeria is up to the Nigerian people and up to the courts. I think even before this bill was passed, that marriage was defined under the Marriage Act as a union between a man and a woman. That's up to you. What concerns us are the issues I mentioned, the restrictions on a couple of key freedoms, and just the creation of an atmosphere where people feel it's okay to engage in acts of hatred and violence. So those are the things that, as a friend of Nigeria, we felt obligated to bring up.
Do you think that there will be any sanctions? I mean, so far so good. We've seen some countries begin to register some protests. Canada cancelled a visit of the president.
Well, I think you saw in the press, I hope, that something I said was misquoted. I was quoted as saying that we might have to cut back on our health programs. I didn't say that. I made clear later that I don't see this having an impact on our health programs or in broader sanctions. But it's a conversation that I think friends need to have.
Well, I think the thing is, those who go out to hate on, maybe as a result of that bill, the bill does not give anyone any right to take another person's life.
I agree.
So they're completely taking the laws into their hands.
I agree.
So those are two different things. So I guess they're hiding under that.
Exactly.
Same-sex Marriage Act.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Two different things.
And I think everybody, regardless of what you think of that lifestyle, I think we can all agree that that kind of violence is unacceptable.
Yeah.
If you were to pick just one cardinal objective of your mission here in the country, what would you say is the main focus?
I think it's to keep our two huge, vibrant democracies marching together towards the future. I've talked about the partnership we have in all different areas. I see myself as having been entrusted with one of our most, I would say, our most important relationship in Africa. And regardless of bumps in the road, we share the same vision of the future, I think, and we have to just keep moving towards that. So it's a tremendous responsibility and one that I'm humbled to have been entrusted with.
Okay, we have some questions already streaming in, especially when we talked about the elections.
Okay.
We've got Jeff. He says, how does U.S. monitor grants it gives to democratic institutions like INEC? Or do they just give grants and don't monitor?
We monitor them very closely. As I always say, money that we spend overseas, it doesn't fall out of the sky. It comes from the pockets of our taxpayers. So if we spend money in any country, we have a heavy responsibility to make sure that it's spent as it's supposed to be. So we monitor these things very closely.
Okay, is there going to be any maybe philosophical shifts, or what would you focus on with regards to U.S.-Nigeria Binational Commission?
Well, we have a session coming up in a couple of weeks. It's on governance, transparency, and integrity. So we'll be looking at some of the election-related judicial issues, that kind of thing. As you know, there's also a subgroup on security and things like that. So the beauty of the Binational Commission is it gives us an umbrella under which we can discuss any sort of issue that we need to. So it's worked very well so far, and we look forward to keeping it going. We think it's a very useful thing.
I was looking through a report I saw, and it has to do with agriculture. As a matter of fact, I mean, here, Nigeria says we will have rice sufficiency by 2015.
Okay.
And then I saw this report where it talked about the United States Department for Agriculture, that's USDA, which says that, well, they're not exactly sure if that were the case. In fact, the headline says USDA faults that claim. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I have to confess I'm not a farmer, as you can probably tell. I read that report. I'm not an expert on rice, but it seems to me that the effort of your government and your private sector to boost food production, including rice production here, is a very healthy thing. I'm not much of an economist, but in my experience, the more diverse, the better in any economy.
Let me also pick up on, he talked about it a little bit. I thought he was going to go into that. I mean, before you come on, there's always been this, it's almost like a phrase. Most analysts talk about a certain prediction coming from America that Nigeria would disintegrate by 2015, and then they attributed that to the CIA. but it turns out that it was not actually from CIA. It was, I think it was the National Intelligence Council. They had this meeting. It was a 17-page document about mapping sub-Saharan Africa's future. You heard that comment?
Well, there are a lot of organizations out there that analyze the future and talk about this might happen, that might happen, and I'm not much of an analyst. But I can tell you from what I've seen after 3 months here, yes, there are challenges in this country, but I think you have a very bright future. You're going to have to, like the same in my country, you're going to have to work hard to get there, but the idea that you're going to fall apart in 2015 sounds very odd to me. I'll come back in 2016 and see if you're still here.
Okay. Well, what hit you first when you came to Nigeria? I mean, what was the first thing that hit you when you got into the country?
A couple of things. One was the infrastructure. We got off the plane in Abuja, drove into town on a beautiful paved superhighway. That certainly caught my eye. The first day, I was not surprised, but I was very impressed. I'd always heard about how open the media scene is here, and I was very impressed with that. That pretty much anything's on the table, the media can talk about everything. The other thing I would say is, you always hear about Nigeria's biggest resource is oil. I would say after about a month in country, it was very clear that that's not the case. Your biggest resource is the Nigerian people. I've been very impressed by how talented and focused and energetic people are here. It's phenomenal. I think that's the most enjoyable part. So far as every day I get to meet people like you.
We definitely know that there are many initiatives, from between the U.S. and Nigeria.
Yes.
Which one of them do you intend to give the most support while you're here?
Well, I don't plan to favor anyone over another, but I must say the one that has caught my eye in many countries, but also here, is our partnership with you in the struggle against HIV/AIDS. You've all heard about our PEPFAR program, which has been going for some years now. I think since the inception of that program, we've spent something like $3.5 billion in this country in the fight against HIV/AIDS, and I think that's a lot of money, and I think it's a sign of our commitment. But I'll go back to what I said about partnership, that we are doing this out of concern for the Nigerian people, but also to give you breathing space as your government builds up its ability to do this itself.
Well, sorry, Jim, that's no small money. Have you been keeping tab on that? Is it working the way you expected it?
Well, it's addressing health issues is always difficult because they change and they morph and so on. But I think if you look at the statistics in this country, slowly but surely we're getting on top of this problem. A lot of it is treatment, a lot of it is education. Just the other night in Abuja, I had the privilege of speaking at the opening of a TV show, Sugar, you've probably seen it, that our PEPFAR program is helping fund as part of the education angle of this. Because obviously you have to treat victims, but if you wait until people are sick, you're probably never gonna solve it. You have to educate people early.
All right, let me get this in. Tunde likes to know, has the U.S. Embassy seen an upsurge from Nigerians seeking asylum following the anti-gay bill passage?
No, we have not.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any cases.
Okay. Well, now that you're here, have you tried any local delicacy yet?
Well, I've had that question several times already. I'm pretty old, but I'm looking forward to trying things like your pepper soup and things like that. So maybe some tuwo, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So what do you recommend? What should my first dish be?
Well, I think Michael could help out in that.
Just go easy on the pepper. But
I've learned the hard way on that.
I think I better just quickly chip this one in. This is from another viewer who says, how will the USA rate Nigeria and the fight against corruption?
I'll be very honest, I think you've got your hands full. I think corruption is a serious issue here. I know that certain government agencies are working hard on this. I look back at the history of my country when corruption was a massive problem. And let's be clear, we have not cured ourselves of corruption. It comes up every day. But I find, if you look back at histories of various countries, the tide turns against corruption when average citizens begin to stand up and say, that's enough. I'm tired of paying my taxes and seeing no results. I'm tired of being ripped off by the big guys. It's when average citizens band together and just say, this is enough. And they take that to the polling booth. They speak out in public. And I leave it up to you whether that day is beginning to arrive in Nigeria. But I think that's what ends corruption, a combination of effective laws and the little guy just saying, I'm tired of this, this is enough.
You know, is there a mechanism or an avenue where the ordinary Nigerian can actually have access to the United States to inquire about some personalities? For instance, a case of someone who is wanted in the United States, or someone who has actually done something criminal in the United States, and you hear stories about certain Mr. A being wanted in the United States for certain crimes. Mm-hmm. Is there a way the average Nigerian can actually access to find out if that is genuine or...
Sometimes those things make the press. That's the best way to tell. But there's also some privacy concerns on things like our visa process and some of our other law enforcement processes. So it's a fine line before you publicize something like that. You've got to make sure that you've got the facts and that kind of thing. But I can assure you that the issue of major players in corruption from any country breaking the law and then finding their way to the U.S. is something we take seriously.
What would you say that, in the fight against corruption is usually the weakest link? Because, people talk about institutions, if it's not so much about the crime being committed, but people being held to account by the law when they finally commit those crimes. What would you say is the weakest link?
I think one of the biggest challenges is when things happen in the shadows. And the best way many countries have found to address corruption is to make government processes as open and public and transparent as possible. So that, for example, on a big contract, all bids at the end of the process might be made public. So everybody can look at all the bids and see why one was picked, that kind of thing. So I think shining the light in all dark corners is the best way to go about it.
Is the U.S. going to participate in, because recently we're privatizing the power sector and we're encouraging lots of investment to come
Yes,
in.
indeed.
Are there going to be companies coming in?
I think there's a lot of interest from U.S. companies looking at that. We were very impressed with what you're trying to do here in the privatization of the power sector. We think it's exactly the right approach. And as you open those sectors up, I think you'll find a lot of U.S. business interest.
Okay, so
Just one quickly, just
Please.
curious. But now you're in Nigeria. Do you
Yes.
find the travel advisories a little exaggerated?
No, I don't, because we have to, as a U.S. diplomat, when you go to diplomat school at the beginning of your career, the first thing they tell you is your most important responsibility is the protection and the welfare of U.S. citizens. At the same time, you want to build relationships with other countries and so on. So we have to walk a very fine line between encouraging ties between Nigeria and America, but also trying to give honest and frank information to Americans so that they know what to expect when they come to Nigeria. That's a difficult one to navigate, but I think we've got it about right.
do you think we get that, not just in Nigeria, most African countries, when this travel advisory comes, in terms of how they respond to it? Do you understand why they respond that way, saying, no, what do you mean? You should come here. You should be able to come here.
Sure, I feel the same way if someone started talking about the places I know in the U.S., but you have to understand the priority for governments of protecting their citizens and making sure their citizens have full information before they travel anywhere.
All right, I'd like to thank you for coming on. U.S. Ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. James Entwistle. Thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, then we'll be back in just a moment here. Please join us again.